Have you ever found yourself exhausted from always being the one to solve everyone else's problems, only to feel underappreciated and burned out? I know I have. In today's episode, Leah Marone, psychotherapist, keynote speaker, and author of The Serial Fixer, reveals why serial fixing can leave us feeling disconnected, and how a simple shift towards supporting, not solving, empowers others and eases our own stress. And what surprised me the most? Sometimes the best way to help is not by immediately jumping in. You'll walk away from this episode with practical tips to reclaim your energy and build stronger, more balanced relationships both at work and at home. Well, welcome to this episode of the Delighted Customers Podcast. I can't tell you how excited I am to have back on the show Leah Marone. Leah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you.
Let me tell you a little bit about Leah. Leah is a returning guest. I am so excited to explore with her new book called The Serial Fixer, and she is a licensed clinical social worker, a psychotherapist, a keynote speaker, a mental wellness consultant, and a former Division I athlete. Woohoo! And a recovering perfectionist. And that's what you and I have in common. I didn't have any of the athletic gifts that you have, but I am trying my best. A grateful recovering perfectionist. And we may end up wandering around that territory in this conversation, but you've been working for over 2 decades, working therapeutically with individuals as well as collaborating with companies. You're a regular contributor to Psychology Today and an expert voice for Newsweek and The Atlantic. And you talk about how people can navigate their mental health challenges, as well as working with people individually. So I am so excited to talk more about your new book, Serial Fixer. Tell us first about the white space that you saw for writing the book.
Gosh, well, I think I have a privilege of being with people one-on-one therapeutically, but then also in groups. And I started to really identify this pattern because I work a lot with people in professions that require high levels of empathy and compassion and higher EQ, whether that's customer service, whether that's education, whether that's human resources or mental health. And what I started to piece together, not only for other people and also myself, is that people with higher levels of empathy and compassion and that are seeing things, and seeing shifts in others that they're with, they tend to be not so great at setting boundaries. And what I mean by boundaries are things and kind of safety nets and different changes that we make within our behaviors and our responses for not only self-preservation, but for safety. And a lot of times this just wasn't happening. And so you were seeing creeping up of anxious thought patterns, of anxiety, of feeling disconnected and confusion around, I'm putting so much energy and effort into my relationships and those that I lead. And I'm 5 steps ahead and I'm accommodating and I'm helping and I'm fixing and I'm solving. And why am I still feeling so overwhelmed? Why am I feeling disconnected? Why is this not working? How is this formula that I've subscribed to for years not helping me? And I really started to think about people are showing up, and it comes from a good place, but people are showing up trying to fix and solve, to soothe other people, but also kind of reiterate to themselves, this is my purpose. This is how I'm connected. This is my role. And you can see when we constantly show up in the professional life and in our personal life with this filter of let me fix and solve and insert myself, maybe even prematurely. It's this recipe for overextension, for burnout, for exhaustion, and fueling, I think, just codependent relationships.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that a couple of things. One is it comes from good intentions, and that what's interesting to me is how you started to pick up on a pattern of people coming in and people that you talk to, I guess inside and outside of the office, who are experiencing things, almost like a random sampling of people who come in and these behaviors are common.
Yeah. And I think, Mark, we all have these very deep seated associations that we start to make from a very young age. If I don't do X, Y, and Z, then I'm not a good person. If I don't help this person, if I don't step in, then I'm not being a good leader. If my team is overextended and stressed themselves, then I'm not doing enough. If my child is feeling sad or not achieving, then I'm not a good parent. And so I think we have these associations that are typically pretty rigid, and you can see where that keeps us in line, and not necessarily a bad way, but it also kind of is this perpetual component to step in as a serial fixer, where we're not meeting people and situations where they're at and allowing people to keep ownership of sometimes what is rightfully theirs, whether it's a hurdle or a problem or something that's, challenging them. We often insert ourselves and jump in and take ownership and try to fix and solve and soothe. And you can see where that's actually sometimes it's control disguised as compassion. In order to if you're okay, then I can be okay. If my team's okay, then really that's confirming for me that I'm a good leader. And it's just kind of fueling, though, again, these little micro codependencies and also imbalances in relationships across the board.
So there's a feeling on the sense of the fixer that not only my individual work is being evaluated, assessed, but my team is a reflection of my own identity. And therefore, I feel a need to step in and make sure the team does well, even if I have to do it myself.
Right. Absolutely. You'll see it even in conversations if you're having a one-on-one with someone and someone that you're leading comes in and starts to share maybe something that's perplexing, that they're struggling with. A lot of times we're very quick to prematurely relate. Or oh, yes, this happened to me 5 years ago. Or, well, this is what you need to do. Or, wow, we've had this conversation 5 times and I told you exactly what to do and you're not executing. What's going on? And then a lot of times we filtrate that through and make it about us. I must not be this great of a leader. Or if I don't tell this person exactly what to do, or if I don't rid this or take this off their plate to alleviate some of their stress, then I'm not doing my job. And so I think those things, again, fuel this fixer mentality.
Yeah, so it comes from a good place. Most of the time, people aren't even aware that this is happening. So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned the word burden, burnout, and I want to talk a little bit about what this all can sound soft, touchy feely to someone in the C-suite who's looking at income statements and balance sheets all day. Talk about the real world implications when this goes wrong.
So specifically burnout, when that?
Yeah, burnout and people who live in a world of serial fixers.
Right. So I think when it comes to burnout, we've heard this word several times in the last 5 or so years, which rightfully so. But I do think, and where I really challenge this, is we're beyond the definition of burnout. We're beyond, a lot of us can regurgitate the symptoms now of burnout. And I think, honestly, we're beyond the Band-Aids and kind of the quick fixes and distractions associated with burnout. We need to find actually the patterns. And a lot of times it's really being mindful of the roles that we're showing up in conversations, in relationships. And you can see where if a leader thinks they might be an effective listener, many people think, yeah, I'm a great listener. But if we're showing up to conversations immediately being 5 steps ahead, putting all the pieces together ourselves, going through our filtration system without really going through the basics of effective listening by first validating and asking some follow-up questions and leaving the ownership with that person, we're not empowering. We're not leading. We're not allowing people and giving them the common courtesy of getting some of their own repetitions in to build confidence and their own self-trust. And you can see where this happens with leaders, this happens with parents, this happens in relationships, where you start to feel like, I have to do everything. I'm constantly putting out fires. I'm resentful now because I feel like I work so hard. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I'm telling people exactly what they need to do. Nobody's executing it correctly. And then it falls on me and I have to be 5 steps ahead. And that is emotional burnout. That's decision fatigue. That's burnout in its finest because of the role that you've placed yourself and continue to foster in relationships personally and professionally. You're serial fixing.
So I imagine the burnout can cause people really to become even unaware of why they're just unhappy every day. And maybe they leave their job, they leave the company for the wrong reasons. They take their suitcase and their baggage, emotional baggage with them wherever they go. Could you? I love this thought. It's really an awakening, and it's something that you said may be subtle, maybe nuanced, but we may not even be aware that we're doing it. Let's take a minute, if I could, get your opinion of what it feels like to be on the other side of that. What is it like to be, let's just start in the business world, the employee, the nurse, the hotel worker that's working for a manager who's a serial fixer? What is that like?
Right. It can actually be twofold because in some instances, as humans, we like to sniff out who we can unload certain things on, who will structure things for us, who will take the burden of certain things emotionally or in real life tasks. And so you can see that if you're working with someone, that they're going to be 5 steps ahead, that they are going to say, you know what, I'll just take that off your plate. Let me email so-and-so. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I'm going to do everything anyway. We calculate and kind of correlation that like, they are going to get this. They're going to be in charge of that. This rids me and covers a little bit of space off my plate. And you can see where we're savvy that way. And sometimes we then know where to unleash some of that energy, leaving that person to continue to serial fix, and we got the benefit of it. But on the flip side, if you're thinking about interacting with a leader, interacting with a colleague that is so quick to jump in and say, well, just do this, or I'll do this, or interrupt or prematurely relate, you can see where that leaves this ambiguous, how am I doing? Am I progressing? Does this person believe in me? Am I able to access vulnerability and psychological safety in the workplace and really share and really hone in on what are my goals? What are some things that I want to improve on and become more, just gain strength in professionally? And if you're working with a leader that is not a space creator, that is not able to meet you where you're at and create that space and leave that ownership with you, and wants to jump in and fix and solve to confirm that, yeah, see, I'm a good leader, I'm getting stuff done and, execute. It's not a good formula. And you can see where cohesion, collaboration, and all those things that we value and know that we need in order to build a sustaining, functional team, we're working in isolation. And people are left to the curb and don't feel that connection.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that. The people who are left on the curb and don't feel that connection. What are some of the red flags that might indicate that you are becoming a serial, or you already are a serial fixer?
Yeah. So some of the big ones are you potentially can give space for people to start to open up or come to you, but you're not very good at doing that yourself. That's one of them. Another one, and it seems a little counterintuitive, but another one might be you're harboring quite a bit of resentment or confusion around the fact that I'm trying to show up and do all these things for everyone and structure and, make sure that I have everything ticked off, and everyone should be grateful for this. And no one's recognizing the lengths and the efforts that I make. And so there's this resentment and this confusion around that. I think it's also, if you find yourself in relationships where, again, they seem imbalanced, but you also are constantly looking at other people's hurdles, other people's, problems, other people's things as structure for you to feel connected and a sense of purpose. And you can see where this is such, clinicians do this all the time out of the gate. We find that being and occupying this role in other people's problems and issues, it gives us this sense of purpose. It gives us this sense of structure. And if we fall too much into that and don't create that same space for ourselves, it's not a good recipe. And so it's hunting out and sniffing out what externally, who externally, what problem externally can I be immediately attached to, even if it's not mine? Can I insert and find a role within so that I know and it confirms that I have this sense of purpose, but I don't have to actually do the internal work?
And what would say more about the internal work? What would that look like?
Yeah. So it's not just about these external boundaries and really this awareness around how you show up in relationships. It really starts with, and I know everyone's like, oh, because it's a lot of work. It's the internal boundaries. It's that self-awareness. It's the conflicts that we have with, within ourselves of, I know this is a pattern, I know this is happening, or I know I should tweak this or advocate for myself or go at this a different way. But there's oftentimes a critical part of us, a pleaser within us, and a part of us that is like, no, no, no. If you don't show up in this way, if you don't open your laptop after 6 p.m., even when you said you're going to cut your day off, then people are going to identify you as lazy because you didn't respond right away. And people are going to question how much of a team player you are, or you're going to fall behind, and we don't trust that you're going to be able to recover and find that momentum tomorrow if you shut it off now. And so you can see that we have constantly these internal conflicts and battles within us. And it's learning to understand and align with some of these protective parts of us in order to create these internal boundaries so that we can execute and feel healthy relationships external.
Yeah, I think that example you just shared about the email or responding back is such a great one, because we are in a world where these things, and for those just listening, I'm holding up my iPhone, are everywhere. And so we can plug in from our iPad or iPhone or laptop or computer, and we're sitting there in the evening, maybe watching a game or watching the news with a friend or family member, and we're looking at emails, and it's like irresistible. We want to respond.
Absolutely. And that critic within us, which I think people that have perfectionistic tendencies, like you and
Just
I,
saying.
we have a fierce inner critic, right? So that critical part is maybe concocting and thinking of all these wonderful plans and schedule, and operates with rigidity. And when the time comes to execute, when the time comes to carry out that boundary or that task, there might be another part of us that surfaces and challenges the hell out of it. And so it's often very hard to find that balance. And I think the biggest thing I try to not only practice what I preach, but share with my patients is many of us find ourselves in this all or nothing thinking, right? We're very like, it's either this or it's way over here and it's this. And I am constantly saying we have to find the middle ground. It's not black and white. We have to find the gray. And what I mean by that is like these different conflicting parts within us that are motivated by different things or trying to protect us from different things. We have to align, we have to acknowledge, we have to understand what those parts of us are really trying to do and the work that they're doing for us, but meet them in the middle. And I think that goes for, I know that's a bit abstract, but that pleaser within us, that critic within us, that voice within us saying, if you don't do this for your child, if you don't bail them out, if you don't email the teacher, if you don't do this and show up in this way, then you're not a good parent. If you're not stressed enough, you're not doing this right. And it's like logically we can challenge that, but you can see where these parts of us are so strong.
I love that. I love that. Meet in the middle. Don't live on the extremes. Don't think it's an all or nothing world. Would you mind sharing one or two more examples of practical ways that we can deal with it if we find ourselves in the serial fixer role that may have been shared in the book as a teaser? And we'll give the audience in the show notes a way to get their own book of their own and learn more about you.
Yeah. So it is. I mean, I really go through the internal and external boundaries part, but ultimately what concludes everything, and really I walk you through, is the steps of support, don't solve. And it's really how you show up as that supporter rather than that solver and that fixer. And so support, don't solve is not, again, this passive way of like, let's make every interaction a therapy session. But it's really that mindfulness of starting out interactions, whether it's with our children, whether it's those we lead, whether it's with our partners and friends. First and foremost, just validating, because I think when we validate, when we demonstrate, whether verbally or non-verbally, that we're putting in the effort to understand and decode the message that someone is telling us and sharing with us verbally and non-verbally, it limits the risk of us, or the tendency for us to immediately go into problem-solving mode and scooping up ownership and not meeting that person where they're at and being that supporter and leading with that empathy and compassion. But we're protecting ourselves too with not leaving interactions with more weight on our back. I like the analogy of thinking about a very entangled ball of yarn. And if you think about if you had several balls of yarn that were very tangled up, and you started to share with me some things that you were going through. And if I immediately start to give you direct advice right out of the gate and share this and that and I'm just catching all your balls of yarn and I'm starting to untangle them myself. I want you to hold on to your yarn. I want to be able to help and maybe pull at some threads for you and still lead with that support. But that's yours. That's yours to do your way on your timeline and sift through while I'm there. But that's yours to keep ownership of. And that's when you get the repetitions in. That's when you build that self-trust. That's when you build that resilience. And so I think that's a great analogy of support, don't solve. And leaders, when they operate this way, they are leading with compassion, but they're empowering people, and people grow and gain confidence. And I mean, you can see just teams flourish when you have that type of leadership.
What's curious to me is as this dynamic happens and you validate first, by the way, I imagine that takes a little self-discipline and intentionality, especially if, like me, have patterns that have been instilled for a long time, and our natural tendency is to jump in, is to just pause and say, wait, how can I first validate this person? Right? And then maybe check in and make sure that they feel validated. Right.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it takes a different level of energy. And this is also where leaders and parents and anyone, you have that permission sometimes to check in with yourself and think, I don't know if I'm able to show up in that way right now. You think about HR leaders, they're historically known for the open door policy. And I've really tried to challenge that with that particular field in general for years, because I ask, how's that working for you? How does it feel to always be available? And that's not just with HR, but leaders across the board, customer service. I know it's like, we always have to be available. No, we're creating space constantly. And a lot of times it's challenging sometimes. How is that working? And is there times, especially as a leader or as a parent, when someone comes to you with urgency, and wanting you to put out this fire? And sometimes if we say something like, I can tell what you have to say is very important. I'm not able to give you my full attention right now. Let's circle back in a few minutes after I finish this. Let's find a time this afternoon where I can be all yours and I can hear what you have to say. We don't do that enough. We find ourselves and put ourselves in this role where we're multitasking, where we're trying to listen and do this. And you can see that too, as we're multitasking with people, as we're multitasking and filling every crack and crevice up with our day of on our devices and consuming and all that. It's incredibly taxing and it's incredibly draining our energy. And so sometimes those boundaries and that courtesy as leaders and as parents, as friends, as whatever, to pause and say, I'm not in that mindset right now. I'm not able to listen and support and create that space and problem solve with you. Let's find a time when I can. It diffuses that urgency cycle and that we see just rampant in the professional world.
In the book, do you get into a turn that I could see happening if you take this approach, which is I'm validating you, and you feel heard, you feel seen, and you're still a little bit stuck. And then I turn to you and I say, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I'm not sure how to go forward. Do you have any ideas?
Yeah. So it starts with validation. That's the first step. And again, that could be a head nod. That could be like, yeah, that. And then it moves into you're creating that space. There's empathy, compassion involved if needed. This also depends, Mark, on the topic, right? If it's someone asking you a very concrete question, it's a given. You're going to answer with a concrete answer. But when there's this pattern, when there's this emotion involved, when there's this hurdle, when there's this issue, problem that someone you can see, that's when this applies. And so it's starting with that validation and creating the space to prevent yourself from going into that fixer role. But yes, there's the step of inquire. There's the step of asking those questions. There's the step sometimes of adding your own flavor of like, well, what would it look like if you did this? Right? There's that motivation piece. There's a lot of things involved that it's not just as simple as like, I hear you, right? Because we want to be able to banter. We want to be able to process. And one of the best, I think, phrases, and I use this a lot, just not only as a clinician, but in general, is the phrase of just tell me more, right? Tell me more. Or walk me through your thinking process, thought process with that. Or we fill in the gaps too quick. Someone comes to us and we're immediately associating it with what we know, what we've experienced. And sometimes if we just ask, walk me through that better, or tell me more, or no, it does sound like it's been a stressful week. And just pausing, asking those questions, it's amazing how someone will start to either share a bit more, start to problem solve on their own, rather than just bait us in and we take the bait and we're off to the races and they can sit there and think, wow, that's really great advice, but I don't have any ownership in it and I don't know how to execute it. So I'm going to be back next week. We'll probably have the same conversation and you can tell me this all again.
Powerful. Powerful. So before we just great conversation, look, what you just shared there and what you've shared in this conversation are gems. And I encourage you to listen back to it, share it with your friends, because this is stuff that it could save not only you from burnout, but really help organizations in general build a strong and sustainable leadership team that has employees who are learning to lead from where they are and maybe to lead as future leaders the right way. So before we land the plane, Leah, I want to ask you the question that I ask all my guests on the show, which is, what delights you as a customer?
Humor. I think humor. I think when someone can throw humor, kind of loosen the situation up, have that human element, I think that does it for me.
Love it. That's the first when I heard of it, but it makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Hey, if people want to reach you or get their own book, The Serial Fixer, how might they go about doing that?
Yeah, thanks. So you can find me at leahmarone.com, and the website also for the actual book is serial-fixer.com. And you honestly can get it. I think it's in Barnes & Noble, Target, Bookshop, Amazon. I mean, it's most places that you can order. So it does come out November 11th. So pre-orders are happening and are very much appreciated. I'm happy I've told this, and I already have a lot of teams scheduled, but in 2026, if you feel like this book resonates with your team and you order it and you all read it, and even just a book study, if you will, I'm more than happy to hop on for a Q&A, and to offer that and really be a supporter throughout that process. So I hope that it resonates, and I'd love to hear from you. So you can find me a lot of different places.
Excellent. The book is The Serial Fixer. Leah Marone, thank you so much for returning as a guest on the Delighted Customers podcast.
Thank you for creating space for me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts, click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.